What is going on, everybody? And in this video, I'm providing you a state of the market and stock picks for April 11th, 2023. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, consider subscribing because we do provide daily and weekly updates to get you prepared for the day and the week ahead in this glorious market. So today was another chop fest. I'm not really expecting a lot, given the sediments and coming from my weekly update where I get more in detail about kind of what I'm looking at this week. Ultimately, right now, the market is waiting. There isn't enough good news to keep pushing up, potentially because of the fact of the potential risks that people are aware of. And then you also have, we're not selling off because no, we're getting mixed messages, and no, there is not enough fear to continue to sell. So that being said, we do have core CPI on Wednesday. That is going to kick us off. That's going to potentially um, push us in one direction or another. Now, the big thing is there has been an uptick in some inflation, and so the question is that going to affect this report? Or are we not going to see that until the next report? And then given and understand that between now and the next report is monetary policy, which at the moment we're still aiming for another 25-point basis move. But aside from that, the other big thing that we have, yes, we got PPI. Again, I don't think the data, even the core, I don't think is really unless the core starts really popping back up. I don't really see any big difference right now. Right now, I think we are just waiting for something to break. And the reason I say that is because on the last monetary policy, we didn't pause. So the Fed, I believe, think that the market can take a little bit more and then before something can break. And given again that inflation is still very high, it puts this funny dynamic on everything. The Fed can't lower rates because inflation is high, but understand that the rates being high, uh, you're essentially running the risk of breaking more banks, especially increasing rates on top of it. So not only are you increasing rates, but potentially holding rates at a high level for a prolonged period of time. You're the longer that window is, the more risk you're introducing for something to break. And that is what Powell is looking for something to break, whether that is banks, whether that is small businesses, a lot more small businesses going out of business is what's going on. And again, they said they were very shocked when they found that, business was still booming. This is where this whole quote unquote growth recession came from. But all indicators are off. You can't even go off of your original indicators. They've been broken for a while, so you're kind of just the market is just waiting. Like we need a piece of news. It's not even just the data anymore. It's not even any of the stuff. You get in these lull periods where there really isn't anything going on, and it's a good time to really educate yourself about the market and everything, and refine your investments, what you're really looking at, whatever the case is. But ultimately, right now, the biggest thing being again is that things again are just in they're in a bad state and we need something to break. Again, no one wants to put risk on because they don't know where inflation is. Inflation is still obviously high. They're well aware of that, and no one wants to put too much risk on because they're well aware of all the potential fears that could be happening right around the corner. So, with that being said, again, like I've stated before, I don't think a recession is not priced in. What you saw was just the battle between the rates and I think greed and fear was what you saw last year. It had nothing to do with the recession. I think at this point, once a recession is priced in, we will take our final dive that we need for this thing to start turning around and pivoting. The problem is I don't think a lot of people just aren't getting it and think we can rebound. And I think the administration and everybody else playing into that story is not helping, and why the market can't just sell and normalize like it needs to get low prices again. Like you have to understand, like I've stated, like to have a very strong bull run, you need down cycles, and down cycles aren't fun and there's nothing fun about a down cycle, right? A lot of people lose their jobs. Uh, stocks, right? Stocks don't really hold any weight. There's a lot of different issues that go on during down cycles, but they are a must, right? If you want the big moves like you had over the past 2 years, you have to understand that was a massive bubble because of the money printed. But to have a nice cycle where we push up again and just go through our normal dog and pony show, can't do that because we need things to be normalized again. And to be able to do that, they have to siphon a bunch of money out, which doesn't help that they pumped a whole bunch of it back in to support the banks. But nonetheless, at this point we need something to break. We need big news that's going to be like, oh, we are getting a recession, the shock of recession. Oh, I know a lot of people are well aware of it, but that's not something that's been priced in. Like once it starts affecting everybody around us, I know I personally have known people that have been affected, and so it's happening. It's not like it's not happening. We are in a recession, and so once the realization, those numbers and everything again come true, maybe it'll be the earnings to expose that. We don't really know. Maybe it will be the failure of more banks. We don't know. Maybe it will be, a lot of commercial buildings trying to go up for a new lease, and then it just doesn't go through, and then all the people lose their jobs because they don't have any place to house people. Or there's a lot of different scenarios that can happen in this current environment that could be the one thing that finally tips it over. And that's what I've been waiting for. And that's what the market is really waiting for. That's why we're getting a lot of chop, because the market really doesn't know what's going to happen. And again, big investors are going to move in, so they're aware of what's going to happen. And on the tech side, things have pumped a lot already. So that's something to keep in mind, is they were down for a while, down heavily since in that last November, and have since at least met back up with where banks and value were. But now there's starting to be some selling again. We have to kind of see what the next step is. And to be able to get the next step is we need more data. We need to know what's really going on. Core, again, hopefully core continues to come down. The thing is you want this thing to hurry up and pass. You're not trying to time a pivot, because you're not going to get it, because of the fact that, again, once the recession starts getting priced in, then that thought of a pivot is just going to get crushed. And so, and most every big downfall we've had is when the Fed have pivoted, start cutting rates. That's when we have the big selling. And so nonetheless, even if we did pump up a lot, the thing is right around the corner, you could be facing a huge dump on top of it. So in the market, again, I'm very undecided, but we'll see. Core is the next big one, PPI this week. And then, like I said, we're really waiting till Friday to see what's going on with the banks. Maybe we get more exposure, what's going on. We do also have Yellen tomorrow as well. She's coming on, so that's interesting that she'll be on. Again, she can't really move markets much aside from intraday, unless she says something that's really off, that is not her normal self. Again, she's going to be very mindful of what she's talking about. So to have something really kind of expose itself tomorrow is going to be highly unlikely. More so, you'll probably see it either in the core on Wednesday, or coming in on Friday with the banks. Is the bigger moves that I'm watching, and then going into, and then we start get full blown earnings mode, right? Then we start getting big tech and everything. We're going to see where everybody's at, and all it could take is for one of them to say that things expose some piece of information. Right now, we're waiting for that one piece of information that's going to point heavily towards a recession. Now, there has been some data that was released today as well, essentially stating that the banks are doing okay. From what they're saying. Now, this is coming from, I think it was the one of the tools that the banks essentially use to give loans and everything, and something I talked about over the weekend, how they've been kind of heavily dipping into that as opposed to having to use any other tools. But the problem is, a lot of this tool I'm talking about, it's only good for 30 days. Like, you have to replenish it within 30 days. If it doesn't, then a lot of bad can essentially happen from that. And so that's the problem, is after 30 days, it's almost been 30 days since the SVB incident. And so that's going to kind of place everything into the end of the week till next week, what's really going to happen. So, but with all that being said, again, I don't want to ramble too much. right now, like I said, we're waiting to see. We're in the high range, right? The odds of this really breaking out, you're going to need some good news, and I just don't see good news happening. I see a recession getting priced in here soon, sometime between now and June, maybe even July, the latest. But some time between there, I think we're gonna see a bottom, and then we'll go from that point. But with that being said, SPX on a technical level obviously has been doing too much, but we are in the top range, like I stated. I think we're still going to see this 3,800. The question is that push down going to be the push that's going to continue to make us a new low? It's hard to tell. There's a lot of consolidation, and the fact that we have this huge, essentially this kind of consolidation is just so confusing, right? Like the market doesn't know which way to go, but it's kept in a range nonetheless. I get good news one day, bad news the next. But if you do notice that we do come down a lot faster than we do going up, so you have to be very mindful of that, because essentially we are pretty much due for another pullback, if not a new bottom. So the question is, when does that happen? What's the piece of information that's going to do it? So we know what the destination is. We just don't know how we're going to get there. And one day it'll show itself, and then we'll get there. So with that being said, we will see. Let's see where we end up here again tomorrow. You bulls, you really want this thing breaking essentially the 4170, and then you essentially got roughly around that 270 ceiling right now is your next resistance, and then it really needs to hold the 4069. If it breaks that, this thing could drop pretty far to the 3050. And then, like I said, I think this 3,800 is kind of where we're aiming short term. And again, depending on how we get down to 3,800 would be driven by what events are currently occurring. So Bitcoin again, still holding high, had a nice little pop today. Again, this thing really needs a break over the 30K mark. If it does, it could do very well. Aside from that, it might pull back, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with this. Again, if the market starts selling heavily, then that's a different story. We really have to see. But nonetheless, Bitcoin is trying to push up along with the market for the most part. So we'll see. But with that, let's take a look at gold. Gold's actually been pulling back some. Let's see some strong support here at the 180. We'll see if this hits 180 and then continues to ride up from that point. Bonds, I think, are very important to be watching, especially with what's currently going on. I think there could be a really big move coming in the bonds once we get that rate cut. It could be a massive. Again, that'll be announced. So once it's announced, this thing could gap up from that point. So something we definitely have to keep an eye on moving forward. Tesla. Showing strong support roughly around the 177, bounce out of it today. Again, it needs to break over the 185 tomorrow, and then we kind of got that ceiling roughly around here, the 202 mark, for retest going into earnings. Again, the earnings is scheduled for the 19th, so we'll see what happens there. But it needs to hold this, otherwise this thing could come down. It's got support. It's got a little bit of support here at the 163, but again, my zone for Tesla is really that 140. I think it'll make it down there eventually. It's just taking time. It's a very slow process with what's currently going on because there's too much indecisiveness. So BA, again, playing range. It looks just like the market in general. Nothing really differentiating it between what's currently going on. So we'll see what happens there. JPM again continuing to chop, waiting to see the earnings. I wouldn't be surprised if nothing really moves until Friday. If things come on par on Wednesday, we could get some movement to the upside. Again, really depends where we are. If we sell off going into core, which is something we have been doing, then it could be a different story. Then we just hit the top of the range again. But we definitely have to see how core is. Again, if core starts, my biggest concern with core right now is if it starts jumping back up, that's a very big concern because then Powell could potentially have to go to a 50-point basis move and potentially more interest rate hikes is the concern there. But if it continues to come down Again, you're continuing to have a lot of misinformation as far as like what's going on, or misdirection, I should say, because it's hard to decipher if that's going to be enough for the Fed to stop and pause. You have to understand, unless something breaks, you're just going to get a pause and hold until something breaks. And again, something I keep reiterating as well is, you need a huge catastrophic event for Powell to start laying off or cutting rates. But it doesn't mean that, that we get to a point to where inflation continues to come down, that they actually pause. No, I think they wouldn't actually pause. They got closer to probably about 3, in my opinion. But we'll see. Or they may pause and wait before they increase rates again. But again, it really just depends on what happens during these monetary policies. At this point, they know banks started breaking. They know they're getting close, but how much more do we need, right? This is why I think we're only doing 25-point basis moves until we get a bigger break. Because if you go a 50-point basis move, then you run the risk of potentially losing some of the bigger top 10 banks, which is not what we want to do. We don't want to draw more panic in. So again, we'll see what happens. But again, things all just waiting for the news, waiting for core, waiting for banks, and then we go from there. And then by the end of the week, we should have a better idea what's coming, what's going. Again, I know I say this every week, but it's just we've been in such a market where it's heavily reliant on the next piece of information, and we've had a run up since November essentially till almost right now. What's come to tech, and you had a pullback at the banks. Again, the banks lead the way. Could be essentially insisting that the rest of the market's going to pull back down to where the banks are. But again, we'll see if the banks continue to sell. That would be more added pressure. Again, insights from earnings could potentially give more insight into a possible recession. Once the word recession starts becoming the norm and changes the dynamic of the market, I think we could really start to get some flushing. But we have to wait for that to happen, right? There's nothing guaranteed, so we really have to wait and see. And that's the annoying part about the whole thing is waiting for things to play out as they go. So, but with that being said, I'll end it here and stop the rant, and then I will see you guys on the field.